What's up, guys? Let's go over how to craft the best and the godliest items in Diablo 4 Season 4. So start right off, one of the big things is to actually start off with an item that can be actually a good godly item. So this could be a unique, this could be a legendary, but it cannot be a rare item. The reason why rare items will no longer be a best in slot in Season 4 is because in Season 4, they actually roll with one less affix. If I was to go to any of the NPCs and go buy a weapon over here, you'll see that it only has 2 rolls, where the other legendaries will have 3. Now, there is a big difference. In Season 4, you can actually trade items, so I can invite a friend, and I could just trade items with them. That is something that you can do in Season 4. You can trade uniques, and you can trade legendary items. However, you cannot trade uber uniques. That is the one exception to this rule. However, to be honest with you guys, a lot of uniques in Season 4 will be basically obsolete because you get less rolls on them, and you won't be able to temper a unique item. So there are going to be some huge advantages to actually just running legendary. So it's really not that big of a deal, with the exception of uber uniques. But yeah, you cannot temper an item. You can see only rares and legendaries, but do not craft on rares. That's very important that we get the rules out of the way. Another thing is you want to start off with the base of the item being relatively high roll. That will factor in when you craft into it, when you temper it, those greater affixes will actually still apply, and you can get a greater affix. So here's an example of a greater affix you can see on the dagger here. So you'll see on the dagger it has that little star next to damage over time. That is very important to take into consideration because you cannot enchant into a greater affix. However, if you do actually upgrade in the Masterwork and you re-roll it, you can still actually keep that high number. Maybe it Masterworked into a bigger number. A Masterwork is basically where you look at one of the stats and it got upgraded. You'll see where it says Masterwork 8 out of 12, those blue numbers, and it can actually go into the yellow here if it goes into Masterworking several times. That can be upgraded. And you cannot re-roll at the occultist as far as the enchanting goes. You can't do that on uniques, but you can do it on legendary items. And if you re-roll that, at least right now in the PTR, that will actually still stay. As long as it's in that slot, it will be good. But I know there's a lot of explaining to do in this, so it's very important that you guys watch this video all the way through because it can save you so much gold. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this item and I'm going to craft on it, and I'll show you guys kind of the ins and outs of it. So first off, do not worry about the aspect on it. You can always craft over that. Do not worry about going to the occultist and actually changing the item stats. Let me move my face out of the way. So a lot of people, they get an item and their first instinct is, I'm going to enchant it. I don't need, let's say, the damage. You can see all of the possible affixes. Weapons are easy, so there's not that many like random rolls, whereas if you get an amulet and you go try to change something, well, there's a lot more rolls. So certain items that have a very specific thing that you may want, it's better just to get it to roll all of the stats that you want, unless you're very flexible. Like if one of the stats, you're like, you know what, I don't mind if it's intelligence or maximum life or another stat. If you're very flexible, then by all means go for it. But if you need a very specific one, amulets are an absolute nightmare to roll. So it's good to try to get certain items to have the stats that you want, and because we can engage in trade, it's going to be much easier in Season 4 to get kind of what you're looking for. But let's take this dagger, for example. The stat of getting the greater affix, the best thing that you can hope for is to get a 3 greater affixed item. You can actually get all of them greater affixed if it is a unique. But because the item has to drop with the greater affix, the maximum that you can get on a legendary is going to be 3. So you'll see where it says the star damage over time. Now, if it was to get the star on the, let's say, just the flat damage, that wouldn't really be necessarily the best in slot. Obviously, it'd be great to have all of them greater affix, but realistically, most people will just try to get at least one of the things greater affixed, which means that it has a 1.5 times multiplier on the stat, and it rolls the highest. Think of it kind of like a primal ancient in Diablo 3, but it's only on that one stat. Ideally, all the stats are there, but again, realistically, for 90% of the player base, you're not going to get every single piece of gear, all triple greater affix. That's going to be insane. But just get one of the things to be greater affix, and I would say that's a pretty good item to go ahead and start crafting on. Again, depending on your build, you may want certain things to be greater affix, like attack speed is one of the greatest things to actually hit. But this flat additive damage, this just percent damage, is not what I would consider really good, whereas the damage over time can roll much higher, and it's a greater affix, so we wouldn't want to roll over that. But let's say I wanted to use this item. So instead of rolling the damage and changing it to attack speed, which is kind of a common thing, or maybe chance to restore a resource, or maybe I want maximum life. The worst stat in this case is going to be damage. However, do not roll it yet. And this is the biggest difference between someone that's min-maxing and actually understands how to craft at the higher end. Instead, you want to temper the item first. This is a brand new sort of crafting system that we have access to. And if you want to get the recipes, you just play the game. Whispers can be a great source of getting them, but they are quite rare. So this is almost like throwing on a aspect on the item. But don't worry about the aspect. Do not worry about anything yet until you temper the item first. And the reason why this matters is there are 2 stages at which an item can essentially brick for your character. So the first step is actually going to be when you are actually rolling the tempers and then masterwork. Now, masterworking is really for like the 1% min-maxers that are specifically looking for something that is going to go to that 12 out of 12. And there are certain masterworks that would essentially brick your item, making it basically not as good as it could possibly be. In this instance, on this Fractured Winterglass, where we have the rare vulnerable damage, that essentially is kind of a bricked stat roll on it. What would we like to hit on it? Well, cooldown reduction would be much better. The additive non-physical damage is very mediocre as well. The Conjuration Mastery is something that we actually want to hit. The best stat to get on that is the Conjuration Mastery. So essentially, if I'm looking at min-maxing to craft the best item, the Conjuration Mastery is the only thing that would make this item a GG best in slot. But the rolls on the lucky hit, your conjurations have a chance to launch a frozen orb on a unique over there. That is the stat that I would actually like to be the highest before I would even considering masterworking it, because you can't reroll the uniques like effect or any of the things on the uniques at the occultist. So the first step is actually to go to tempering. So the reason why is because this is a stage at which the item can brick. So it depends on your build over here, but let's say I wanted to run something that gave me since we are doing, let's say, damage over time, I want to hit Incinerate. So I know right here it says that there's tempers 5 out of 5. That's actually not true. There's actually 7 tempers on an item. The first 2 are granted for free, and then the rest, they will use the tempering durability. So you can craft 1 from each family. So in this instance, since we are doing something related to, let's say, dot damage, right? Let's say it was Incinerate. I have to hit that Incinerate. There is a total of 5 rolls over here, so our chances are going to be 20% chance to actually hit that one. So I would start off doing the tempering. And the reason why you do this is because if I don't get that, that essentially bricks the item. So I didn't hit what I wanted. Let's go and keep on continuing. And again, this is what we're trying to hit. We're trying to hit that Incinerate size. Okay, so let's go and keep on going until we hit that Incinerate. Firewall, okay. Well, that still works with the damage over time, but I'm not a firewall build. So I would want to hit that specific stat. So we got firewall size again. Okay, that's not what we're looking for. And I would keep on doing this until I hit what I want. Now, I may not hit it, and this could essentially brick the item. Okay, I finally got it. But let's say for the sake of the video over here that I had no more durability. I can still reroll, and over here on the offensive, even though right now you'll see where it says I have no more tempers, right? And you might think, oh, well, I bricked the item, I used all my tempers. That's not true. I actually still have a recipe category for the offensive. Now, in here, this is another bonus tip. Natural Finesse will actually give you the greatest chance to get something good because most builds can make use out of most of these. If I was to go to something like Frost Finesse or like a Fire one, there could be some higher chances to hit something I don't want. So, for example, Cold and Vulnerable would, if I was to play a Cold build, I could basically use both of those. But damage to Frozen or Blizzard or Ice Spike, those are conditional. I might not be playing Blizzard. I might not be doing Ice Spike. Or the enemy might not be actually frozen, especially on bosses. This is a huge difference in damage. So therefore, crafting Natural Finesse, since I only have 1 roll here, it's going to be a much better investment. So you can see now, it says it's reached its tempered limit. Okay, cool, that totally works. But now I have actually reached the tempered limit. You'll see in the bottom, the temper's 0 out of 5. So I got the Incinerate size, which is the exact thing I wanted. Now, what is the next step over here? So a lot of people might think, well, the next step would be to then go and upgrade it over at the Occultist, right? Where you would go over here and you would then reroll. No, that is where, again, min-maxing, the smarter thing to do is actually to go into the Masterwork to try to hit one of the rolls that you want. Because if there is a roll that's very important, it doesn't matter where it hits. Now, this is just on the PTR right now. Things are subject to change, but I'm going to show you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and just upgrade it to the first, next tier here. So all of these will be increased by 5%. each time that you do this. So on each tier, you're getting 20%, which equals 60% at the very end. So when you go to specifically 4 out of 4, so each upgrade is 5%. But on the fourth one, on the Mastercraft, you do require these other materials. These are attained by doing the pit. Each one of these has a certain tier that you need to go up into the pit for, but basically just do the pit is how you get the materials. You also need these other materials. But on the fourth one specifically, this is going to increase one of them. So you'll see where we got incinerate size over here. Now, what is interesting is you can't roll into a greater affix. However, if one of these gets mastercrafted on the affix, so if it rolled intelligence, damage over time, those stats can be actually changed at the occultist, and it will maintain if it's on slot 1, 2, or 3. But since you cannot go to the occultist and reroll the tempers, which are the little ones with the anvils, those ones cannot actually be changed, but it's totally fine. You can do that later. So you'll see over here, if I was to go ahead and mod the damage over here, since we actually already got the upgrade on this by 20%, that number will actually still factor in. You could do this at any point, at least as of right now. So you'll see where it says damage. If I am to re-roll this, because that was like the bad stat, let's say I didn't want this, I can infinitely enchant. There is no failure at the enchant. It's just a matter of how much gold you want to put into the item. Now, in Season 4, there's a maximum. On one-handed, it's like 3.5 mil. On two-handed, it's like 7 mil. On amulets, it is kind of an in-between. So if I was to, let's say, roll the damage over here, and now it's going to become untradeable, but that's fine. So let's say I select the maximum life. You'll see how it says 712, but remember, we have master crafted it. So we're going to go ahead and do this. It'll say 712, but it jumps up to 819. So you can see at any point we can then enchant. And the reason why I say enchanting it after is because if I didn't hit, let's say that bonus, you can see where it says incinerate size. That's the stat that I wanted. If I never hit that on the temper, this item would have been bricked for my build. Or if it was like, let's say I was playing a frozen orb sorceress. If I was playing a frozen orb sorceress and I never tempered that frozen orb, at that point, I've wasted my items, so it's very important that you do it in that exact order. You can see if I enchant again, if I say 21 damage, it's not actually going to be 21 because it maintains that mastercraft. So you see it says 21, but it gives me 24. So that is very important that it's not really explained for, I think, a lot of people. Also, the Oculus over here, you can see where it says plus 15 to teleport, whereas this other one started off with plus 10. If I am to mastercraft this one will maintain that number. So it's great to start off on that very high number. Another thing that I wanted to add to the video was specifically mentioning the little like reset button here. Now this is just for masterworking because you cannot retemper the item, but you can basically reset the masterworking of an item. Pretty much you lose the material, but it gives you the ability to infinitely reroll, but it is going to cost materials each time that you do this. So, to explain it, you just click on this little reset thing over here, and it's not going to refund all of the stuff that you put in when you started masterworking it. So I want to go over basically why you would do this over here, and why you'd want to do this as soon as you don't hit that stat. So taking a look at basically what we had for that video, which was specifically a greater affix damage over time, and then if we were to get it, let's say 12 out of 12, it would actually gain the stat 97.5 damage over time. Now, if I was to, let's say, hit it on the master working on tier 1, this is what it would be, and then tier 2 would be this, and tier 3 would be that. Ideally, let's say I was to play a damage over time build, and this is the thing that I wanted to hit. So as soon as you have that ability to actually do that modification on the item when you are masterworking it, if I was to, let's say, go and masterwork it and I was able to reset, as soon as I could reset, you're not going to, again, get your refund back, but let's say we hit this one over here. The first one was good, and the second one, oh, we got intelligence. Oh no, well, I don't want the item anymore. Let's go ahead and just hit the little reset button. As soon as you can hit that reset, I'm not sure exactly if that is going to be changing. If that needs to require you to go all the way up, then it resets it. But specifically, as soon as you hit one of the things that you don't care about, and for a lot of builds, this could be specifically hitting that tempering size of the skill, or a lot of skills will use some sort of like chance to use, let's say, Frozen Orb twice, right? You have the chance for Frozen Orb projectiles to cast twice, that you would throw on normally instead of, let's say, Incinerate or whatever skill that you want. Usually you have one skill slot and then one like damage slot for the weapon category. But now that we understand kind of the basics of it, I wanted to go ahead and go over kind of a recap, as this is kind of very important over here, which is essentially the order in which you do things. So I'm going to go ahead and pop this up on screen. So what we want to do is start off with an item that is greater affixed, ideally. Yeah, you can craft on non-greater affixed ones, but realistically, if we're talking about making a godly item, you would ideally have every single stat be greater affix, but I'm going to be real with you guys, it's probably unlikely, but just getting one greater affix can be pretty big for a lot of different builds, and this is kind of build dependent. Maybe you need that very specific plus ranks of skills on a unique, or whatever the case may be, you want to try to hit that one to be the greater affix that you need for your build. Remember, you can trade in Season 4, this is huge, so start off with a good item before you masterwork it, before you start tempering on it. The next step is to then temper the item next, and if it is bad, you will reset the item. At some point, if you don't get that temper mod that you need, that deletes the item, you're GG, it's gone, it's in the trash. The next thing you want to do is masterwork or enchant the item, and then you want to do whatever you didn't do. So if you enchant first, then masterwork, that's fine. If you want to masterwork, then enchant, doesn't really matter which order you do this part in. Although I would say, if you really want to, I'd say masterworking could be like better first, because then when you go to the occultist, you can reroll anyways, but realistically, it doesn't matter too much. Again, if you have the item that you want, again, the most important part that cannot fail is the temper part. The rest, technically, it soft bricks the item, but you can just reset the things. You will lose out the materials when you do reset. At the masterworking, be a little reset button here, but again, it will not brick the item. Tempering is the spot that bricks. That's very important. And then, if masterwork fails, you go back to step 3 again. Then you would then masterwork the item. And then on top of that, again, the most important thing is to reset every single time you don't hit the stat that you want. If you can do that, I'm not sure if they're changing it, because all the info that I'm giving you guys is from the PTR, which still allowed you at the occultist to reroll whatever got masterworked. You can reroll it, and as you guys saw from the gameplay, it keeps the same bonus stats that like you would increase in percentage, right? And then if you want to use this item, because this is something that I do understand, if you wish to use the item like in between, like you're like, okay, this is what I want to go ahead and use as an item, and I don't want to wait until I complete everything, you can actually go ahead and throw in the aspect at some point. You can also enchant earlier, but I would say the main thing that you need to make sure that the item has, unless it's just a stepping stone, obviously this whole video is about making your godly the best item in the game. Ideally, you'd want to temper first before doing any of that, because again, if it tempers, you cannot regain extra tempering durability. Once you use all of those 7, again, I know it shows 5, but I already showed you guys, even after that runs out, you technically get an extra 2, because the first one on each different affix is basically free. That is because you add the tempering to it, because it says 5 out of 5, but when you craft the first one on, let's say, incinerate size or close enemies, those individual ones are basically free tempers that you get. But it would waste gold if you don't do it in this specific order, because if you go ahead and fail at some point, like let's say you masterwork, enchant, whatever, and then you temper the durability at the very end and you don't hit what you want, well then you just wasted all the gold you wasted throwing on the aspect, which is more materials. So keep in mind, this is going to be objectively the best order. These again don't matter. The tempering, I gotta stress that. Get that correct first before you go and try to make a GG item. Anyways, that's going to wrap up things. Hopefully this guide and video helped you guys out. If it did, drop a like on it. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn the bell so you don't miss out on more future important guides and stuff for Diablo and other gaming content. Peace out.